Hey, everybody. Josh Sheridan here with the Barely Legal Podcast. On today's show, we have a local host of the Sunday Sesh, right? Mm-hmm. Ken Apperson. You're a St. Pete guy?
Oh, now I am.
Now you are. Yeah. Okay. You came over from St. Pete today.
I did. Yes.
Okay. Mm-hmm. And so, but a Florida guy originally, or?
No, I've been in Florida for about 12 years.
Okay. Did you come here from New York?
No.
Okay.
No. St. Louis.
Oh, okay.
St.
All right.
Louis, Missouri.
I need to get a map in here so I can start putting a little thumbtack in wherever people are coming from. But I've had an inordinate amount of people from New York. But I guess that's just true of Florida. A lot of people, migrate here from there. So St. Louis, what is Apperson?
As far as I know, it's English.
Okay.
It's an English name, and I only know that because I went to Epcot and went to the English names section in the English part of there, and I found my name.
Well, there you go. Yeah, it sounds as good as any other explanation.
It sounds extremely generic. A person with two P's.
Ooh, I wouldn't have been able to break it down like that, but that's interesting. So St. Louis until what age?
Let's see. I was 20. I guess I was 22.
So you had some of the Midwest, ethos kind of drenched into you. You were there long enough for it to kind of stick.
Absolutely.
Was your family religious at all, or were they?
It's a funny thing.
It always seems to go hand in hand with the Midwest. You got the Bible Belt, and you got the Midwest kind of.
For the most part, but St. Louis is a unique place because it's
a bunch of heretics.
Well, yeah, among other things. Yeah. But the thing is, the city itself is this kind of self-contained, non-regional. Like you can hear the way that I speak. I don't have much of a Southern accent because I was taught. Well, one, I have a grandmother who was very insistent on proper diction and vocabulary and all that. But also because St. Louis is this funny, self-contained, non-regional place. They have the Cardinals baseball.
Sure.
They have, toasted ravioli.
Right.
And everything else is a little bit generic.
Yeah.
So the behavior outside of maintaining a good amount of like Southern hospitality doesn't really hold true with other like Southern things like, tea. We don't like sweet tea. We like non-sweet tea.
Is it considered South Missouri?
This is what I mean.
Yeah, it's kind of exists on its own plane. It's kind of a middle distance between the up north Minnesota, that's Wisconsin area.
Yeah.
And I've been to St. Louis a couple times. It's funny, for the longest time until like my late 30s, the only 2 traffic tickets I ever got in my life were in Missouri. 2 different trips. My dad was in the seminary to become a priest before he met my mom, and he was at Conception Abbey, Missouri, which I don't know if that means anything to you, but way out in the middle of fucking nowhere. And so you can drive a couple hours and not see shit. And so you don't really pay attention to how fast you're going.
Yeah.
And, I had the cop beam up behind me and he's like, you know how fast you're going? No. You could have hurt someone. I was like, who? You're the first person I've seen in 4 hours, but beautiful place. I mean, it was, the people were great. The weather was great. It was a cool town. So siblings?
One brother.
And how old? Younger, older?
He's 7 years younger than me.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, we barely grew up in the same house, realistically.
And where is he now?
He's up there in Missouri with my dad.
You guys talk?
A little bit.
Yeah. It's always weird. I don't know what the sweet spot is for age difference between siblings where they have a shared experience and they don't have a shared experience.
I actually read somewhere that if you're 5 years or more apart, it's very hard to find commonalities.
Yeah.
Common interests, common threads. Because essentially you grew up in 2 separate generations.
Right. I've had a few guests on who were like one of 7, but the next oldest one was like 10 years older. It was basically like they were an only child after the first family moved through town. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what brought you to Florida?
Well, I was 22. I was in a band, and we thought that the band was going to conquer the world. And
what was the band?
The band was called Everlight.
Okay. Now, what year would this have been?
Let's see. This was 2008, 2009.
Okay.
Around there.
And how old of a guy are you?
I'm 34.
Okay. So where did music enter your life? Was your family have music on? You didn't have an older brother to
No,
listen to his albums?
That's true.
Was dad playing records or just friends, or how did it come into your life?
Mom had a piano when I was very young, and then
Did you play it?
In the face. I didn't play it. I never took an interest in it when I was young. Couldn't care less about it when I was young.
Piano is such a valuable instrument in learning music, but it's one of the least sexy instruments out there, so it doesn't have that appeal to younger kids like a guitar or what drums do.
Yeah. When you're a young boy and you want to be a badass, and it's hard to see, a badass behind a piano. When in reality, there are so many. First one I think of is Jerry Lee Lewis.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No, I mean.
But yeah, so Mom had the piano, couldn't care less about that. She also had an old guitar lying around the house.
Acoustic?
Yes. I never saw her play it, but I knew it was always there. Picked it up when I was 7 or 8, put it right back down. Picked it up when I was 12, 13, put it right back down. And then for whatever reason, when I was around 15, I picked up that guitar and I never put it down.
What were you into at that age? Were you, an artist? Were you an athlete? Were you an academic? Were you a layabout? What was your?
I was I was into skateboarding at the time.
Thank you. Okay, so this is what I was hoping your answer is, because anybody whose point of entry to music is skateboarding, I can
you can relate.
I can relate and talk to.
Well, the funny thing is, music wise and culture wise, I wasn't deeply ingrained in the skateboarding culture.
Right.
But like music wise, my favorite band was Incubus. That was my favorite band. I wanted to play guitar like Mike Einziger. I forget how to say his last name. I wanted to play guitar like him.
Right.
I loved the way that he constructed melodies. I didn't know I loved these things at the time.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about it. But he was very courageous with the way that he constructed melodies and chord structures. And the way that they wrote together as a band collectively was really inspiring to me as a person at a young age who didn't really feel like I belonged with any one group and didn't really feel like I related to anyone in particular.
What album did you start following them with? Do you remember?
The first one was the Make Yourself album.
Okay.
And then I went, retroactive. I went to
Science.
Yes, Science.
So Science is when I remember first hearing them, and they were much more of a kind of new metal-y type of...
Like metal meets hip-hop, strange.
Right. Very angular guitars, very kind of truncated, rhythms, more in the realm of Deftones or, Limp Bizkit, Korn, and that sort of thing at the time. And then they kind of became a little bit more pop in their sensibilities and ballads and, more traditional song structures. But I remember that Science album because it was during that, they were a weird band when they first started.
They were
weird in a good way. Yeah. So Incubus got you on board. Did you ask for electric right away, or did you play the acoustic for a while?
Of course I asked for an electric right away, but the parents made the rule. They said that if you keep playing for the next 6 months until your birthday,
right,
which was October at the time, then we will talk about a electric guitar and lessons. But they said you can't have one or the other. But they said you can't have a guitar unless you're going to take lessons.
Right, you got to do both.
Yeah.
So would you say it was 6 months without lessons or an electric guitar?
That's
and this was pre-YouTube, I would imagine.
That's right.
So, what were you doing? Just watching MTV or buying, tab books from your local store?
It was right when tablature websites
were popping up,
became a thing. Like literally, maybe that year or the year before that. I don't even remember the popular one at the time. But yeah, I was pulling tabs. That's basically what I was doing. I was pulling tabs and I was learning chords. I did buy a chord book and I was learning chords. The funny thing was in the guitar case that contained my mom's guitar that was now apparently mine, there was a lyric chart for American Pie with chords.
Right.
over the chord changes of whatever the lyric was. So I learned those chords painfully because the guitar was just it hadn't been set up ever. And
I always love early guitar stories. Like I was one of my favorite documentaries is We Jam Econo, which is the Minutemen documentary.
Oh, cool!
And Mike Watt, who was the bass player for that band, but has gone on to be kind of a hero of everybody in that genre. But Flea was talking about how when Mike Watt started, he didn't realize that you actually tune the strings. He thought that some people just like to play them loose, other people just like to play them tight, and it would just tighten them or loosen them until they felt comfortable. I was like, I can't even imagine what that sounded like, but anyway.
That's hilarious. Wow.
So anyway, 6 months of pulling tabs and figuring out chords with your hand.
Yep. 6 months of pulling tabs and literally making my fingers bleed because I didn't want to stop playing. And next thing I knew, I'd stuck with it long enough. They got me
an Ibanez.
Nope.
Okay.
A Strat Pack. So the Squire Stratocaster with the.
So red or white?
It was black.
Damn, I'm striking out today.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
There's Ibanez always seems to be the gateway drug for a lot more Florida people because it's always like metal. If you're a metal guy, then it's the Ibanez.
It's true.
And then with the Strat, they're always white or red for some reason. But you got a black one.
Almost always. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. So I was the best thing that could have ever happened to me musically was the teacher that I.
Man, does that make a difference?
Everything.
Yeah.
Everything. I mean, so, because I told them basically I had learned that Mike Eisinger was a jazz theory major. He had a degree from jazz theory. And I was like, so then, okay. So I need one of those. That's what I need to learn.
Right.
So they got me a teacher who knew jazz theory. And it turned out he had a master's degree in jazz theory and performance.
Wow.
So he knew his stuff.
So what did those lessons look like? Is it what song do you want to learn? Or was it, because that's usually what you get.
It started that way.
Yeah.
It started that way, as they usually do.
Yeah.
Half-hour lessons. I'd come in this teeny tiny little closet-sized room. He's got a little boom box in the corner,
right? And
on top of an amp, and he's got a little music stand, and that's pretty much it. 2 chairs, that's it. Very close quarters. And the first thing he ever taught me, I still remember the first thing he ever taught me was proper strumming technique.
Yeah,
because that was the thing that I was missing.
Well, that's the thing with everybody. I'll say the left hand, but it depends on, which way you're oriented.
Sure.
But, so the right hand always kind of is the last thing people pay attention to. And it's true. I mean, to this day, I still can't hold a pick the way I'm supposed to, but you're so concerned with scales and chords that you never pay attention to the strumming.
That's one of the reasons why I was so lucky to have the teacher that I had, because he made me put a lot of focus in my right hand.
Right.
Also because I'm left-handed.
Well, there you go. So
my right hand needed that attention.
Right.
But so that lesson went by, and he said, this isn't going to happen in 1 week. Stick with it, and it'll probably click on like a light switch when you finally understand this. Because he didn't just give me like a set of exercises. He gave me an entire concept of technique. And once you essentially learn that concept, then strumming becomes universal.
Right.
These ideas can be applied mentally. You can hear how they're applied to any strumming structure because it's just rhythm, basically.
Well, it's interesting. So a couple things there. First off is the concept that you're talking about, I think, is so universal and so important and so misunderstood in pretty much teaching anything. Mm-hmm. There really is an order in which you need to learn things because, for instance, I'm by day a divorce attorney. And so I'll have people get on the phone with me and they start telling me about this fight that they had. And, he's a drunk. And I was like, let's start here. When did you get married?
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. How many children do you have? Like, give me I always, it's a horrible analogy, but I say, we got to put the Christmas tree up before they hang the ornaments on it. So, but that's, there was with guitar, I'm still learning. I was really into jujitsu and martial arts for a while. And people kind of, they want to learn this move without understanding leverage and position and breathing and all these other things. And so, as with what you're describing, that first teacher or kind of where you enter into guitar can make all the difference on your success or failure on it.
It really can.
So that was one thing. And then the other thing was, and this is where you'll be able to educate me more, but one of the concepts that kind of resonated with me is looking at a fretboard like a keyboard or like a piano and thinking about strumming like percussion. It's almost like percussion and a key, two different instruments playing on two different sides of that. Two different instruments playing on both sides of that instrument together, right? You're percussive this way, you're pulling the notes out on this side. So
that's what he taught me. Right hand. He said your right hand is percussion. That's what he said. He said this instrument is an extremely versatile instrument, and he taught me to have a lot of respect for it. And he actually he taught me to kind of to be a bit of a snob for a while there.
As far as what music you listen to, or
as far as who I respect as musicians,
right?
And I missed out on some, so I'll get back to that in a minute. But basically, the right hand is percussion, and think of it like percussion. Think of it like a groove.
Right.
No matter if you're strumming or picking, no matter what you're doing, that's going to be your source of rhythm, and you should always sound like you have an internal source of rhythm, even if you're playing solo. Because how many really great guitarists have you heard play with a band and they sound tight and they sound great, and then they switch to their track that's like them by themselves, and it's like, ooh, they're rushing a little. They're slowing down. There's variance in their tempo. I can't. Anytime I have students, that's one of the most important things I impart upon them. And you're right. In the beginning, that's just not something that they see because they're not focusing on that. They don't know that they need to focus on it, and that's fine. Walking the path more and more gets you to the point where you go, oh wow, this was actually really important. I'm glad he taught it to me.
Yeah, it's interesting because, with the advent of YouTube, a lot of times you'll hear you don't need a teacher anymore. You can just go on. And while I don't think that that's incorrect, I still think the right teacher is better than no teacher. Would you agree?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And another analogy that I draw is I'm big on therapy. You can't do divorce law for a long time without going to therapy.
Can't even imagine.
And there's definitely the right therapist and the wrong therapist for you to go to. So I guess there's no one size fits all, but there's definitely, like you're talking about, you gotta lay that foundation. So, let's go back to the Strat Pack, the guitar lessons, teaching you to be, what was the word you used? What was the word? Not snotty. What'd you say? Snobby. Thank you. Snobby. So, that's an interesting concept to me too, because I've always approached all this from a fan. I'm much more of a fan of skateboarding than I am a skateboarder. I'm much more of a fan of guitar players than I am a guitar player. I'm much more of a fan of music than I am a musician. So, and I can really appreciate technically proficient people, but generally I gravitate towards sloppier, punkier, and sometimes that's a really good musician who's doing that on purpose. Other times it's Johnny Ramone who only knows 3 chords and like half the strings on his guitar are broken. So but I kind of can go both ways. Like now, so one of my big areas that I like a lot is metal, and some of the techier metal I just doesn't do it for me.
Sure.
But then I don't know if you know Nels Cline, he's a guitarist for Wilco, but he's been in a bunch of different bands. I mean, he's just a wizard, and he's in his 60s now, but he's still just a shredder. And so I love that. But then, give me a couple power chords and, a drum set, and I'm happy as a clam with that too. That's
the thing that I missed out on as a teenager and as in my 20s, realistically, my early 20s. I had a teacher who was a jazz person, and nothing against jazz people, but I think they'll even say themselves, jazz people often elevate their interests to the level of their ability.
Right.
So if you're not on their level ability wise, they're tuning you out.
Yeah.
And that was kind of what was going on with him. So bands like Nirvana, for example, Come As You Are. Come As You Are is like one of the most basic guitar licks ever.
Right.
Period. It's one of the first licks that I teach to my guitar students. And I learned, because I respected my teacher so much, that this is not good music.
Right.
This didn't require any work to earn. They didn't earn this music. They stumbled upon it, that kind of thing.
Right.
Now, the thing that I lost in that mentality is that doesn't mean it's bad music.
Sure.
Furthermore, it means that it's not just music, it's art.
Right.
And that was the thing that I missed for a long time. I thought that the mechanics of learning music,
the science over the art,
it equated to being an artist, and it doesn't. It equates to being a technician.
Right.
The artistic expression that comes from, those raw power chords and that really heavy and just screaming into a microphone. That's art. It really is. It's artistic expression, and it should be respected for what it is.
Right.
For that exact reason. And now, as a 34-year-old, I am wishing that I'd learned this 10 years ago. I like to try to marry the two concepts of artistry and mechanical, proficiency, because I look at music theory and I don't just see it as like a roadmap, because that's how I saw it. That was the analogy I gave students. It was like music is like a journey that you don't really know where you want to go.
Right.
And music theory is like the GPS that tells you all of the roads that are options, that tells you all of the roadblocks to avoid, that shows you the scenic route if you want to take the scenic route, or it takes you the direct route if you want to take the direct route. It lifts the fog and shows you every option you can have. Now I see it as that, but I don't see that as the end game.
Well, so as you're talking, I'm kind of building a construct in my head that music can be a solo sport, or it can be it can be a conversation with a listener or another player. But figuring out the value, where is the value in music? Is it in what you're doing, or how it's sounding, or how it's being received? And there was a book that I love, and I've not even finished it, but I think it's called How Music Works. David Byrne from the Talking Heads wrote it.
Cool.
And, I know that there's probably books upon books upon books upon databases on this, but about how notes impact your brain and impact, your mood, and what notes go together and why they go together, what notes don't go together, and then talking about that route that you can go on. You can throw this here, minor chord here, and it makes it sound, more of a sad song, or a darker tone versus, all these sorts of things. But I as much as the work that goes into it, the talent that goes into it, the creativity that goes into it, I think equally as important is how it lands. And so getting back to your Nirvana example, it doesn't matter if you're just plucking an open string. If that called for that note, then less is more. It's talking the same with jujitsu. You can do some crazy loop choke circle blah 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 blah, or you could just do a single leg takedown, mount the person, and it's you don't always have to take the hardest road to get there.
Furthermore, to extrapolate on that, more often than not, the most effective, and I say effective because I define artistry as the marriage between honest, raw, emotional expression and expressing it in a way that can be received by people who need to connect with it.
Right.
So in that sense, music is most effective when you find that balance between complexity and simplicity.
It's true, but then also I'm a big fan of music that takes a little bit. You can go in any millions of different directions, but the one that for me was the Dillinger Escape Plan. The first couple times I hear them, I was like, I don't even think they're playing in the same. They don't know what the other one's playing.
Yeah.
Like, it's like this guy just wrote this guitar part, this guy wrote this bass part, this guy wrote this drum part, and they just laid them all on top of each other.
Yeah.
But it's like this. I always use the analogy of those pictures you stare at that are a bunch of dots on the wall, and you stare at it for long enough, and all of a sudden it's a boat.
Right.
Music like that, it's like all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a second, okay, I got it, and then all of a sudden it's like. So I dig some of the challenging stuff too. Some of it sounds like wanking or noodling,
Couldn't agree more.
You know, and that I can't get behind. But in any event, so let's go back. Everlight, Strat Pack, jazz music, snobbery. So this is all in St. Louis still?
All in St. Louis. Yeah.
Okay. Did you guys play live at all?
Yeah, we played live. I hadn't been in a band yet. We didn't start that band until, after high school ended, really. And I started teaching about a year after I started taking lessons. And, so
you must have picked it up quickly to be teaching lessons a year after you started taking lessons.
I don't mean to brag about this, but I am very proud about it. I'm very proud of it. I was in my lesson with my teacher. I was 16 and I was griping about my job at McDonald's because it was my first job.
Sure.
It was terrible, obviously.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, why don't you just teach? And I said, no, I can't do that. I've only been taking lessons from you for a year. I haven't even been playing for 2 years. He's like, you absorbed in 6 months about 2 years worth of college level music theory.
That's amazing.
You can teach.
That's very cool.
I was like, okay. So I got to start teaching at a really young age, which just solidified all of the music theory that I'd learned. And I feel really uncomfortable even talking about that, frankly, because I don't really like to brag a lot. But that's one of the things.
I think if you're bullshitting, you're bragging. I think if it's what happened, you earned it. And so, why wouldn't you?
And that mentality of earning it just kind of further solidified that kind of snobby mentality that I wish I'd never developed.
Well, here's another question I have. And this always seems like a big hurdle for me is going from playing in your room or going from playing in a room to playing for an audience and just figuring out like setting up the soundboard, getting the sound right, like that I guess that's just something. Is that something you just figure out as you go? Or
well, I can tell you for me, I just figured it out as we went. I had stage fright.
I
had major stage fright, so it was really difficult for me to do anything but stand on stage and
just look down and strum.
And I was, for the first band I was ever in, that was pretty much my role. I did some singing and I was pretty bad at singing.
What type of music was it?
Oh man, it's, we didn't know how to put a genre on it. Bad. I'll say that. A little bit fast, influences of punk, influences of like that alternative rock that was popular in the early 2000s.
Right.
That kind of stuff, really.
Okay. So how long did that last for?
Maybe at the time it felt like forever, but probably less than 2 years.
Right. And then what came next?
And then Everlight came next.
Okay.
And that band, we got really lucky. We had a buddy who had parents that made sure that he worked really hard at his job, and he saved all his money, and he ended up spending it all on recording equipment and learning how to use it, and essentially ended up buying a studio, or rather renting a space and creating a studio. And he used us as guinea pigs. So we got 6 months of free recording time just to go in and write and record.
Is that out there somewhere?
Probably.
Yeah. On Bandcamp or Spotify or YouTube or something. MySpace. Yeah.
Probably on
the forgotten platform. Okay. So how long did that go on for?
Well, that went on until I moved down here to Florida.
Well, what brought you here?
The band had a manager.
Okay.
And the manager was based here.
Okay.
And the manager said, I can do more for you if you are in the town where I have my connections.
Sure.
And so we were like, well, we're not getting as much traction here as we'd like to. We're impatient early 20-year-olds. Let's do it. Let's move. Let's leave. We want to go. We like the warm weather, all that stuff. So we moved down here. That was in December of 2008.
Okay.
By April of 2009, the band had broken up.
Was there a Yoko Ono involved, or was it just a difference of
if there was a Yoko,
direction?
It was me.
You were the Yoko.
If there was a Yoko, it was me, which is to say that I moved down here thinking I had a job lined up, and that job didn't actually exist.
Right.
I didn't do enough work to really make sure that I had a job lined up.
Gotcha.
And I had a buddy who played cover gigs.
Right.
And I texted him one night knowing that I had like $300 left in my bank account. And that by the end of the month, I was probably going to have to move back. If we all didn't, I knew I was probably going to have to. And I texted him, hey, what are you doing? He said, oh, I've got a gig, but I'm sick. said, wow, I'll cover for you. Haha, JK, in my little Motorola Razr phone, you know, and
your BlackBerry.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't even have one of those. And he was like, oh man, can you cover for me? It'd be great. And I was like, no, I can't cover for you. I don't know 4 hours worth of material. I barely can sing through an hour with my band. He's like, no, you'll be fine. It'll be great. They'll love you. They'll probably book you again. Just play the same songs over and over. You'll be fine. I don't know, how much does it pay? And he told me how much it pay. I was like, wow, that's more money than I've ever made for playing music ever.
Right.
And so I did it. And then he liked me and they booked me like 3 more times that month.
Wow.
And it started to snowball to a degree.
Now that's a whole thing in and of itself. Do you know John Holt over in St. Pete? He plays in Danfield. He used to play in Hip Abduction. Mm-hmm. So he does a lot of that. When my mom passed away, we had a wake for her at the museum in downtown St. Pete. And I asked him to come play and he said he would. And he said, I'll send you a list. Tell me which songs you want. And it was like a zillion songs. I was like, how can you do that? Even if you have a monitor, even if you have something like that seems almost impossible to me, not just from a talent perspective, but just knowing the lyrics to all those songs. Like, I don't, how do you explain that? Is it just something you figure out by necessity or?
An extension of muscle memory.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, if you know martial arts at all, you're familiar with muscle memory.
Yeah.
It just turns out that muscle memory can be developed in very specific ways. Like there are times where I'm singing a song and I can't mentally think of the next lyric, but my mouth will just start singing it.
Oh, it's like, putting a tie on. You try and explain to someone how to put a tie and you can't do it, but just turn around and let me do it. So I get that. But that was some, one of the things that I always fixate on in music is like the benign, mundane stuff, why someone has a radio connection to an amp versus a cord, or what type of mic someone uses, or where they put the mic, or how they sit. I'm always focusing on like the weirder parts of things. So
sure.
That's why I love having these conversations with people, because you can give me an answer as to why it is. So
you got to watch it with me, man, because I'll talk forever, especially when it comes to music.
So I went down this rabbit hole. I've talked about it before. There's a podcast called Crash Bang Boom, which is a drummer's podcast, and it's mostly metal drummers and all this other stuff. But I've learned so much about like how far away you sit from your kit, what your seat height is, how you have your cymbals angled, type of stretching and breathing you need to do, working on your rudiments, like all this other stuff that I just had no concept of. So totally. I love knowing why the engine works. The
why for me from a very young age for everything is so important.
Right.
For everything.
Right.
Anything that I learned when I was
again, it's that foundation though.
It really helps me process and retain.
Right.
It really does.
Right. So now you're doing solo gigs, and that kind of spells the end for Everlight.
Oh yeah. Well,
Everlight or Everbright?
Everlight.
Everlight. Okay.
Yeah. Essentially what happened was the other bandmates got into some substances.
Yeah,
one of the bandmates got into substances.
Okay.
And, I couldn't really speak to what happened with the other one.
Was it a 3-piece?
It was essentially it was a 4-piece.
Okay.
And then our drummer who lived here, we actually met when we moved here because our old drummer didn't come with us.
Okay.
But the new drummer, he was a bartender and he was like, I'm good. I don't, if I don't have this, well, okay, that sucks, but I'll play in another band.
Right.
He was great. He was a nice guy. And then, they got into some substances and basically I just got to the point where I was like, I made a rule with them when it came to that stuff. Cause I did, a few things here and there. I dabbled. I never got into cocaine. I've seen too many guys that played music that were really crazy talented, just ruin their lives because they got into coke.
Right.
So I never really got into that. And they did. And I was like, hey, do your thing. Just, keep
it away from me. Yeah.
If it doesn't affect the band, I'm cool.
Yeah.
The second it affects the band, I'm out.
Yeah.
And that was what I told them. And that's what happened.
Well, it's good you were able to, maintain that boundary, because it's easy to set them. It's harder to follow.
It was excruciating.
Yeah.
Because it felt like I was telling my family members that I was never going to talk to them again.
Sure. Yeah.
It was very painful process to go through.
So now you're in the solo world. How long did that last for?
I'm still doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any bands since then, though?
I started a band called 55 South.
Okay.
Essentially, it was a band that I just kind of like brought the musicians in and was like, here's the music. This is what we're playing. Because I was like, I'm not doing a Democratic band ever again.
Right.
Not doing it.
Right.
I tried to pay them what I could. And they were great. It went well.
What type of music was it?
Well, that was the biggest problem because I had a hard time. I didn't want to write music that could be defined as a genre, which, as it turns out, is like a non-starter.
Yeah.
Any kind of marketability.
Yeah.
It had influences of blues. It had influences of rock, but it was far less rock than Everlight was. Everlight was very like alternative rock.
55 South, just the name of it is evocative to me of like a Americana, like alt country type of, was that?
It should have been.
Yeah.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
It should have been.
Yeah.
I mean, the music from it is, I just released it as a solo, but it's on Spotify with my name.
Under your name?
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to check it out.
Yeah, it's on there.
So the solo gigs, how's that been this year? Is it just completely dropped off, or are you back going again, or?
I'm going again.
Yeah.
Now. When it first came back, I struggled with whether or not to start playing again. I struggled with the morality of it. I struggled with the idea that for the first time ever in the music industry, we have to try not to draw too big of a crowd.
That's
thank you for the most paradoxical conundrum.
You were trying to get a contained chaos and make it antiseptic.
Yeah.
And it's a mind bender. So I had a plan late summer to do, Tom DeGeorge from Crowbar. I've had on here a number of times, and he was nice enough to say, you name a night, if I don't have anything booked, you put on whoever you want to put on. So I've always had this dream of like having a podcast fest every year where people who have been on the show will play on a card together. And I had everybody committed, and it was great. I was looking at it, and then as we were getting closer to it and the numbers were going in the wrong direction, and a lot of it happens to be punkier music. Sure. And it's like, how do you have a punk show where everybody's standing in a corner, like looking at each other?
It's
like,
awesome.
Yeah, it just doesn't sound any fun. Hold on a second. Okay. So there's a safety perspective of it, but at the same time, you don't want to put on a show if it's not going to be any fun for anybody, because that's just a bummer all around. So how have you found it since you've started doing it again?
I made a rule in the beginning that I was only going to take as much work as I needed to pay my bills.
Right.
That's what I did for a while.
Now, are you still teaching too?
I did for a while. That kind of dropped off when I started doing my show.
Right.
Because I realized really quickly that even if it's once a week, a live stream show.
So yours is, you do it live?
We don't always do it.
Okay.
We don't always do it live because we just don't have the luxury of my partner, Ben Italis, who owns Lunar View Media LLC, which is an audio video production company, mostly video production company. He does that for a living, and so I can't ever ask him to forego
a paying client,
just so he can shoot live with me every Sunday. And we've also had some scheduling snafus with artists, and so it kind of worked out that we did some of them Yeah. And I mean, if you look at the show, like I can't tell you how proud I am to be able to work with Ben.
When did you start it?
We started, I guess technically it started during COVID because.
Was it because of COVID?
It was because of COVID because I started it just on my own on an iPhone in my living room. And I was essentially just playing cover songs for my friends and family much, and using that as a way to supplement my income because they were nice enough to shoot money into my Venmo at that time. And then I saw I saw another one, DTSP Live, Saved by Streaming. I saw them take off. I was actually I got to work on that project when it first started, and Katie Talbert, she's amazing. like one of the most hardworking people I've ever met in my life. I saw what she was doing. I saw that the live stream music world was craving more people because there was no concerts anywhere in the world, and et cetera, et cetera. So basically I was like, okay, well, I can do this on my own and can keep playing for 5 people, 10 people, whatever. Or I can buy some cameras maybe and try to learn that stuff.
Did you think early on about the visual component along with the audio component? Because that's been a thing with me, and I guess it depends on whatever your original conceit is or what your original idea for it was. But a lot of people say, well, you should have video. That'll increase your listenership, and I don't disagree, but that adds a whole other.
A lot more work,
and you got to sync up the video with the audio, and then people who are coming in, like I always look like a fucking slob, and people are like, what should I wear? I was like, I don't give a shit. It's just audio. You come in naked. You come in naked if you want. Yeah. I don't care. But my entry point with podcasts has never been visual. Like I know a lot of them have that, and a lot of people watch Joe Rogan, but for me it was WTF with Mark Maron. That was that podcast has been almost a religion for me. And that's what really got me kind of ingrained in that world. And he's just audio. So that's all I ever, but, in any event, sorry.
No, it's okay. I think and I'm learning this more and more, and it's a daunting thing, but I think the reality is the thing that you want to create, whatever it is, however you want to create it, as long as you own it, there's no real wrong way to do
right or wrong,
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I couldn't possibly come into this room. It is a cool room. It's very visually, interesting. You've got a lot of stuff in here. But I could never come in here and be like, dude, where's the camera? Right. You got to have video. You got it. Yeah. Because the reality is if having a camera and not having a camera, whatever works for you. Right. And that's going to make your show better.
Well, so, you mentioned some of the stuff in here, and part of my thinking there is it can inspire conversation about stuff that maybe you didn't come to sit down and talk about, whether it's, Ozzy Osbourne or Stanley Kubrick or, Patrick Swayze. You got little touchstones around that can kind of send your conversation in different directions.
Totally.
So conceptually, what was your thinking with your show? Was it going to be to introduce people to music, introduce people to your music?
So I realized very quickly, and, I realized that basically, I knew this already, but I was like, if I want this to be bigger than just me sitting in my living room, it can't just be me performing.
Right.
It may not be me performing at all. And so I started kind of like testing the waters, and I was like, okay, I would do a live stream where it was just me in my living room on my phone. But I would start trying to do like current events style stuff. Like I created like these like segments and basically did at first I did it with 2 hours, and the idea was that like half the show was going to be me like doing a like daily show type thing.
That's a lot of pressure to put on yourself.
It's a long time. Yeah. Way too long.
Well, that's the other thing is attention spans,
Attention spans, especially. Yeah. So I was like, okay, 2 hours is too long. That's not going to work. The segment thing doesn't work because I'm all alone, and that kind of stuff really requires like graphics and cool stuff. And I didn't have that. So I was like, okay, nix that. All of that's gone. All right. The answer to this then maybe is me being a show host and inviting friends on like a podcast, basically. But I didn't even think of it like a podcast.
Sure, yeah.
Because that would have been way easier.
Yeah.
As far as because I wouldn't have had to do the camera thing. Like I said. Right. So I brought on a couple of friends in my living room, set up some mics. We did the whole thing. And then I realized, okay, well, more people means more tech, means more stuff I have to do in addition to being a host. So I was like, okay, at this point, this is not something I can do on my own. I can't do it alone.
Right.
Or if I try to do it alone, it's not going to be nearly as good as it probably could be.
Right.
So I started thinking, okay, well, who can I hire, that kind of thing. And then I've known Ben Vitalis for, 10 plus years.
Right.
He's a great guy. And I knew that he was like starting to venture into the live stream thing, and he had the right tech for it. His lunar views got like, I don't know. I think he told me one time like $90K worth of like mostly video equipment.
Right.
And I had the audio equipment. I have a home studio, that kind of stuff. And so I was like, whatever, shot in the dark. So I got in touch with him on Facebook. I did this. I don't know why I did the hand phone thing. But I got in touch with him on Facebook.
Yeah.
He said, okay, let's have lunch. So we had lunch and we talked about it. I told him what the concept was. I said, so basically it's the only hosted music talk show in the Tampa Bay area.
Right.
There's nothing else like it. So in that sense, we're first. Or at least we're the only, we stand alone. And if we do it on this level that I know that he was capable of, I was like, if we do this on this level that I know that you're obviously going to be able to do it on, I think that we're going to have an edge over anything else in town.
Right.
And he was like, yeah, okay, we can try a couple of these and see how it goes. And what I didn't know is he was vetting me at the time to a degree because, most people, when they come to you with a grandiose idea, they don't
know if you're full of shit or not. Yeah.
You might be full of shit, or you might not want to do the work that it takes to do it. And when you realize how much work there is, it's like, oh, I don't want to do this.
Right.
But that's not me. Like when
you say you're going to do it, you're going to do it.
Well, yes, for starters, but also it's like if I see something that I think has potential, man, I sink my teeth into it.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, well, if I work my ass off at this thing and it doesn't work, I at least can say I worked my ass off and it didn't work, not because of my lack of effort.
Then that's an important consideration. And that's something that as I've gotten older, I've held on to is, I'm the least athletically, like I don't give a shit about sports, but I use tons of sports analogies. I don't know why that is, but I always have this kind of leave it all on the field concept. If I fail miserably, but I know that there's not a single thing I could have done more to try and get to that goal, it's a lot easier for me to sleep at night than to have failed because I half-assed it or something else. So yeah. I definitely appreciate that. One of the things I want to talk with you about, and this is one of the things that kind of wasn't the original concept with my show, but is this show for me has been a portal that has introduced the local music scene to me, or the concept of a local music scene to me. My music snobbery came in a different way. It wasn't technical, but if it wasn't, international, national act, I really didn't know about it. And I thought, well, if it was local, it can't be as good as whatever else.
And that's a common perception.
And, my buddy, Greg, who's sings for Wolfface over there.
Cool.
He's an attorney, and so he's got an alter ego. He doesn't like to be,
really?
He doesn't like people to know that's him. But he was kind of what set me down this path. We had a lunch with each other, and I thought I was just having a lunch with a younger attorney who, when I left the state attorney's office, I went with attorneys and I was like, what do I do? And how do I do all this? And so as I've, getting close to the 20-year mark, now I have, people coming out and they're saying, what did you do about your website or whatever? So I thought I was just meeting with a younger attorney to talk business, whatever. And halfway through the conversation, he drops it on me. He's like, yeah, so I have this thing that I do and it's this band and, it's pretty popular. We put a couple albums out and, there's a label in Germany that wants us to come tour over there. And I was like, the whole dynamic of the conversation, like it went from me being the mentor to all of a sudden me being the fanboy. And I was like, tell me more. Fuck law. I don't want to talk about that. Tell me about this. Like, where do you play? Tell me about your albums, all this stuff. And for like a couple months after that, like I wouldn't fucking leave him alone. I was just bothered. But so the idea of I can do something other than run child support guidelines all the time, that was more artistic and spoke to things that I enjoyed, music, skateboarding, all these other things. It sent me down that path. But in the beginning, I was like, I don't fucking know anybody. I know you, and that's about it. And so I knew Ray from Creative Loafing because I've done some legal work for them before. Like if they need information on a case or something, I kind of. Cool. And so I talked to Ray, and he's like, well, you should talk to Dave Decker, and Dave. Do you know Dave?
I've heard the name.
So he's a photographer for Creative Loafing. He's got a band, Big Sad, but he's had he had a band called Clermel, and he's from this area. I don't know if you're aware of Clermel at all, but it's over there by kind of on the way to Brandon, which has turned out to be this weird mecca of just bizarre musicians and artists and everything. So anyways, it became this domino effect. And it's like, okay, well, now I know this person. And Sean Kyle I met through a buddy of mine. We were at Fort Greene Fields, and I told this story jokingly in the bio that I wrote up for him. But my buddy Gio and I were sitting there eating a Scotch egg or whatever those things are, and I swear to God, he was like out of a movie. Like anybody who knows Sean, he's like from another time. Like he's got like riding goggles on and like a scarf and gloves, and he looks like he came out of a Vanity Fair picture or something. And he sits down and starts talking to us, and so I've gotten to know all these people, and then Tom, and it's just this domino effect. And now I have all these people that I've met and all this music that I've been introduced, the guys from Have Gun Will Travel and all these different, Elliot from, Vacancy and all these different people. And it's such a broad spectrum of music. Keith over here at Microgroove and his New Granada label that's puts out a bunch of music. And it's such a rich scene here. And I love it. Like now, when I'm on Spotify, I'm not listening to, whomever. It's local bands, and it's, and I love it as much, if not more than everything else, because I can put faces with it, and I know these people and I know their stories. So again, we're starting out in a different spot from you in some ways that align, because it's especially because of COVID. Now, I started before COVID, but people are so starved for content, music, for live music, for performance.
Yeah. And
so, I can only imagine how that's really kind of, blossomed in what you're doing.
I can't say this enough. Yes, 100 times yes. In everything you're saying, honestly. I really believe that we live in a city, in an area, in the Bay Area, where there is so much talent. There's not just performance talent. There's not just, songwriting talent, but just overarching, like overall. There is enough talent in this city that this city should be a
Nashville
city,
size.
Nashville and LA,
yeah.
Miami,
Yeah.
And so there are a handful of other people in this city that believe that too, and that are actually like working towards that.
I've heard bits and pieces of conversations in that regard, and man, if COVID didn't fucking slam the brakes on it, but I'm hoping.
Yeah.
I have this faith that music / art has survived worse storms than this.
Certainly.
And so, despite best efforts, it's going to, find a way. But do you know Pat Klemoish?
No.
So Pat Klemoish, he was a guitarist for the Hip Abduction.
Okay.
He plays in Danville with John Holt. He's also Harvard-educated doctor, paddleboard champion, fluent in Portuguese, plays the Kambala Ngoni, plays all these. If you want to hate yourself, hang out with Pat. Like, he's amazing at a million things, and I'm like shitty at 10.
Yeah.
But he's interesting because, first off, one of the smarter people you'll ever run into.
Love people like that.
He's super educated. His dad's a doctor now. They're both doctors, but so he's had the ability to travel a lot. And he was on the podcast early. We grew up, went to high school together, but didn't really know each other. But I digress. The point that I'm getting to is he talks about the importance of deltas in music.
Yeah.
So the landmass of a delta where there is a convergence of pathways from different areas that bring together styles that bring together. And you can see it in South America. You can see it in the southern United States. You can see it in Africa and all these other places, that these meeting points for divergent styles or divergent points of origin create something completely original or new. And so while the Tampa Bay area isn't really a delta, it shares a lot of the same principles, whether it's cultural. I mean, you've got a big Spanish Latino contingent, but there's also a big Southern contingent. So you have some country types of origins. There's an urban, so there's a lot of the rap and that sort of stuff. And then, I mean, obviously near and dear to my heart, you have Morrisound, which, created death metal effectively.
Man, I'm dying to go and record in that space.
I'm dying to get those guys to come on the show.
Yeah.
So anyways, it either by design or just by happenstance has become kind of this multifaceted meeting point of so much, reggae, like just all this stuff. And, it's all right here and it's amazing.
Yeah.
Well-written music. Who's the guy? I'm going to draw a blank. Will Quinlan. Do you know Will Quinlan? Oh,
yeah. I'm familiar with Will.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's been around for quite a while, and I started listening to his stuff. And it's amazing to me that he's not the biggest name out there just listening to that music. So anyway, about your show. So you started in February, March?
Oh, no. We got started. I started doing the live stream thing probably back in, I think the first one was either April or May.
Okay.
And then, but that wasn't what it is now.
Okay.
What it is now actually started in September.
So what is it now?
Now it's the Sunday Sesh.
And tell people who maybe aren't familiar with what it is.
It's the only live stream music talk show in the Tampa Bay area that features local, really spectacular writers, performers, all of that.
So people go on the Facebook page to watch it?
That's right. Yeah,
okay.
It's on the Facebook page.
And you can watch it in real time, or you can go back and watch old episodes?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Funny thing about live streaming that I've learned is that, it's not like TV where it's like, a broadcast and then it's gone.
Yeah.
And they can't watch it anywhere.
Sure.
Right? Whereas, live stream, it's like essentially the live stream is just kind of like a boost for any video.
It's just a launch. It's an initial, it's an IPO. It's an initial offering. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny how much our lives used to be scheduled by TV.
Boy, oh boy.
Like Thursday night at 8:00, you had to be at home because Seinfeld or Cheers or whatever the thing was, now it's like, I couldn't tell you what time anything is on or what channel anything is on.
Because you don't need to know anything.
Right.
You just watch it whenever you want. That's amazing.
So how many episodes, do you call them episodes how many episodes are you in?
We have done 16 so far.
Is it one a week or what's
was one a week.
Okay.
We're on hiatus right now.
Okay.
We're essentially, we're going to retool and rebrand a little bit.
I saw there was a finale on your thing, and I was like, well, that's interesting because I've kind of tried to think about, for me, am I just going to keep doing it? Or like at some point, my first producer's like, you need to like kind of cap off your first season or your first volume and go to volume 2. I was like, does that matter? Is that a thing? Or I don't know, but
sure.
I'd be interested. What was your thinking behind that?
Well,
was it to retool?
Yeah, essentially. Okay. It's to rebrand, retool. We're going to do a different name. Are
you really?
Yeah, we're going to do a different name. We're not going to do it on Sundays anymore.
Okay.
We did a little bit of polling and asking our viewers, essentially what day they're most likely to watch. And most of them said Wednesday. So that's probably the day we're leaning towards switching to. And, the show is called The Sunday Sesh. So we changed the day. We got
The Sunday Sesh on Wednesday. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't really.
Do you know what you're going to name it yet?
We have a bunch of ideas. Okay. We have more ideas than we have names that we like.
Right.
We've thought of everything between Sound Minds and Codify and band content, but like band is like BAND instead of, and like put it on like a parental advisory style logo, band content.
Right.
So it's hard to say what it's going to end up being.
It's funny because, Barely Legal for me was, it was a Ali G joke.
Yeah.
Being an attorney, it was like, well, I'm an attorney. And early on, I was interviewing a bunch of attorneys and judges, but the more artists I got in, I was like, okay, this is the way I want to go. So it's like,
I was curious about that.
So part of it was, so the year after I got married to my wife, we went to France and Italy, and it was her and her brother and her sister and a friend. And at that time it was 2006, 2007, Ali G was really big. And I remember there was a skit, and I've told the story before, but he's interviewing the attorney general. If you know that show, like they don't know that he's fucking with them. That's the thing. And so he's like, well, what is legal? And he starts defining what's legal, what's illegal. And he goes, oh, what's barely legal? And the guy starts defining his, well, I saw this movie Barely Legal and this, and he starts going to this whole thing. And so it's always an inside joke to me, but there's like literally people who won't come on the show because of the name of it, because they think it's like some weird,
that's funny,
porn deal. Yeah. And like I have t-shirts, I'm out of them now. I'll have to get you one, but I've had people who say, people stop me in the line at Publix and were like, "What's that?" I was like, "Well, shit, was that a bad idea?" And my wife. So my wife is my conscience. My wife's always the one who pulls me back from the edge. Like I always, how like a lot of these shows, like they name their listener or something. I wanted so badly to call them podophiles, and my wife was like, "Do not do that. Do not call them podophiles. That's the worst thing." She's like, "You're going too far."
So one thing we're learning, me and Ben are learning about this whole thing, because the thing about Ben too, not to dive too far into a digression, but he has a background in broadcast television. So like he doesn't just have this gear. He's been
he knows what works on the other side of the camera.
Yeah. Literally.
Yeah.
But so this new project is like new territory for him too. Right. The first time he's doing this, not in a broadcast television setting. So he's learning a bunch of stuff too. So the funny thing about it is that we're like, well, we're the first ones to do this in town. And like, as the weeks went by, so like when I first started and I joined forces with him, so to speak,
right,
I was like, this is it. Our first episode, we're going to go viral. It's going to be crazy. Whole city's going to love us. Nope. Yeah. Did not happen.
Well, not only that, but
didn't happen.
Do you know how to track it? Like, I still don't know how to track it.
I'm learning.
Because like Buzzsprout will say, you've got 10,000 downloads. I was like, okay,
that's great.
But YouTube says this, but is that the same person?
Right.
And then Spotify says this, and it's like, well, does one person clicking register on all these things? So people are like, how many listens? Like, I couldn't tell you if it was 5 people, if it was 50 people, or what.
Well, the nice thing about the live streams is that you can
see in real time. Yeah.
Well, not just that. Like, there's the metrics are 3-second viewers, 10-second viewers.
Oh wow!
Viewers,
so you get into it.
We can really see that. But the one overarching thing we've learned about, live streaming on a social media platform is that 1, people are consuming this content on their phones.
Yeah.
And 2, because of the fact that they're streaming this content, they're consuming it on their phones. They're not sticking around for the whole thing.
Right.
They're just not.
Right.
And that's okay. That's the thing where you're learning. It's okay if they don't stick around for the whole thing.
Right.
Because again, if we do it right, we'll get them to come back and watch the rest of it. And that's what's been happening. We've seen that over and over again.
Yeah, return viewers. Like, is there a way to track that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the great thing for me is I don't give a shit. Like, I just put it out there and people listen to it or they don't. I don't make any money off of it. I don't make people pay for it. And so it's what it is. I was like, I've gone to a restaurant before and seen someone wearing one of the shirts that I was like, that's fucking rad. Or like someone will reach out to me like you and said, hey, that makes me feel amazing,
Good.
So as far as booking, how have you found that to be? Because there's kind of an ebb and a flow with me. Like sometimes I worry, like, am I going to be able to find anybody else that anybody's going to care about to come on? Then like the next week, there'll be like 6 people who I either didn't even know to ask or never thought would agree to do it that would come on. And then I was like, oh, okay, this is great. So I'm always kind of like feast or famine on who I can get on.
So many facets of this show have made me do things that I've never done before, that I never even thought I would want to do before. And one of those aspects is booking. And the things that I learned about booking are the things that I learned from booking myself at places, which is to say.
So you had a background to at least conceptually understand certain
myself,
considerations.
But definitely not for other people.
Well, especially with you, because you have people coming on and playing. So you got to figure out like getting equipment there. And you have to have more than one person who can do something. Like me, it's just one person.
Yeah.
But if you got to have a band, it's like, lining up everybody's schedules.
I'm the guy running audio in addition to being the host. So
yeah.
I'm also the guy behind the scenes doing but doing a good portion of the photography.
Right.
While my partner Ben he's running the board. He's not running the board. He's running the switcher.
Right.
Like video. He's running all the video. And our agreement is I handle the audio, he handles the video, and I handle, bringing most of the content stuff. Obviously, we talk about everything to like.
But you're not paying these people to come on, are you?
No,
okay, yeah.
No, nobody's making any money on our show.
Well, it's a marketing piece for everybody, though.
That's what we've kind of decided it was going to be.
And here's where it made sense for me in a weird way, and it became a Trojan horse for me because. Anytime I bring someone on, the people who are interested in them meet me.
That's me.
And that may not have been another way for me to meet that person.
Right.
And so at some point along the way, I might mention that I'm going to surgery or something. And then that person's like, oh, I need a divorce, call them. So that's kind of the marketing side of it. Although I really don't even care. That's, let me say it's been a nice side, what do you call it?
Side hustle.
Side hustle or a symptom of this show, but not one that
I see.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, I don't care, about, I so much more appreciate just meeting people like you, but that has been a side benefit to it.
That's awesome.
So, how are you reaching out to these people? Are these all so far just people that you've known, or?
Luckily, it's mostly people that I either know or that I have a connection to through another friend. Because it's like you said, like once you start traveling in these circles, they're not terribly big circles.
Right.
So if you're not an asshole, and people, you see that you're working on something that might turn into something cool. They
especially right now
be part of it. Yeah.
I mean, in a weird way, flipping the whole COVID deal on its head. I mean, making the most of it. You're giving people a conduit, a vessel to get their stuff out to people where they don't have it anywhere else.
That was my mentality. And like when our bands come on, I say our bands, when the bands come on our show, we shoot this episode, we shoot a bunch of photos, we record all the audio, obviously. And like the whole episode's recorded in HD, and then we take that and we chop it into, like I take it and I chop it into individual clips, which is another thing I learned how to do, video editing.
Yeah.
I knew how to do that before, but I learned Premiere, so that's fine. And I put it in a Dropbox folder. I haven't like actively like given it to all of them yet. The idea is that I want to post some content and have it for ourselves first because it's our content first. And then it's theirs. Mike Mass, if you know him, hip hop, Wave Theory. He came on the show and we got to do that episode at Crowbar. And that was how I really got, like I'd met Tom before. We had met before. I played a show at Crowbar before. Right. This was years ago. Sure. No way he remembered me. Funny. Well, never mind. I'll talk about that later. But we got to do that episode and, afterwards, it looked phenomenal. I'll probably say this a dozen times. I can't thank my friend Ben for being part of this.
That's great.
Because he has all the skills to make it look professional.
Right.
Like I'm the host and I worked and I'm still working very hard to be an effective, be a good, host.
Right.
And I feel like, okay, so that's my biggest contribution to this thing is knowing the people to book, being able to, have an idea of what content we need to have in there. In format and handling all of the promotional side of stuff, social media and all that stuff. But, Mike got in touch with me afterwards. He was like, hey, man, can you send me the clip of the interview? Because I want to use it for my press kit. I was like, that's great. That's a great idea because, you send out a press kit, an EPK. Sometimes they don't just want to hear you play. Sometimes they want to know if you're an asshole or not. Right. And if you have a thing that lets people get to know you, which he did a great interview. He was excellent.
It's funny, that's another thing too, is not all guests are created equal. And, I've had, I get a lot of unsolicited criticism, but I try and take it to heart. And,
you should do.
Well, one of my friends, like, you got to stop talking as much about yourself and let the guest talk. And so
I've been told that too.
I try and pull back, but sometimes I'm looking at a guest and they're just staring at me like a deer in the headlights. It's like, well, someone's got to talk. It's either going to be me or it's going to be you. And so
one of the things that I started doing early on is I started doing pre-interviews. So I'll have a phone conversation or a FaceTime Zoom conversation, whatever. And I've developed like a document of like,
10 questions that
somewhat.
Yeah.
The questions kind of come pretty easily at this point. Basically, my thought process is, okay, these are local acts and I want people to care about local acts.
Right.
So if they don't know who this band is, especially if they're like a songwriter band or something like that, like Sean was on my show too. And I'm like, okay, well, I need to give people who don't know who Sean is a reason to care about who Sean is.
Right.
And I need him to tell them that. So I ask questions that kind of lead that direction. Who are you? Where have you been? What have you done? That kind of stuff. And then, you go for the content, not content, the viewership helping questions, which are like, the band that we just had, Nightbreakers, which are incredible, by the way. They're ridiculous.
Right.
And they're like early 20s, like
Right.
early, really young guys. They're fantastic. During the interview, I asked them, who gets the most girls? And they're all like, oh, they all like squirm at that question because they're young, and their audience likes questions like that.
Sure, they want to know that. Yeah, inquiring minds want to know.
Inquiring minds want to know.
Do you have, and you don't have to say who it is because, I'm
favorite?
Favorite or bucket list that you haven't?
Oh, I've bucket list that I haven't?
Yeah.
Oh, God, it's a mile long.
Yeah.
There's so many people in this town.
Yeah.
Like, you already mentioned one of them, Have Gun Will Travel. I would love to have Gun Will Travel on the show. Alex Harris, who's like big in the R&B world, he's phenomenal. Ari Chi, she's also in that same circle. Ella Jet, Honey What. Actually, I have them all written down in my phone somewhere. My main criteria really for guests on the show, and this is actually going to change going forward too, because we're going to start we're going to start featuring more bands and acts that don't have much of a following at all.
Right.
And we're going to pre-record that content and then air it on the show and air it as ancillary content on the social media as well. And then again, those bands and those acts that don't have that content, they can't afford to pay someone to do it. Now they have it.
Now they have it, right.
And essentially my biggest overarching goal is something that you just said a little while ago, actually, was the fact that, a lot of people, especially in the Tampa Bay area, they think of bands and they think of music and they think of national, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's a normal thing because the national people have the money for promotion.
It's low hanging fruit too. It's right there.
It's right there. It's easy to grab.
Right.
Yeah. How many radio stations do we have in this town? And almost all of them feature absolutely nothing but, major label national act music. Partially it's because they're owned by, Clear Channel, iHeartRadio. I guess Clear Channel doesn't exist anymore, but iHeartRadio, CBS, Cox Media.
Right.
They're owned by the big ones, and the big ones, they like to have consistency in programming in all of their stations.
So this leads me to two different topics. One is, I'll start with, do you know Aaron Marco? Mm-hmm. All right. So he and I always have this conversation. I don't remember him in person, but we always have this kind of argument on Facebook about Spotify. And I think Spotify for big bands is horrible. I think Spotify for local bands is amazing. Mm-hmm. And I have constantly tried to get friends who are on Bandcamp to get their stuff on Spotify because functionally it's so much easier to share it or to introduce people to it. And, my buddy Ade, he's got this band Black Clash. They're another young band, punk band. He's this 6'6" black guy who they sound like the Cro-Mags or Black Flag or something. And they're just, you talk about raw talent. They have so much fire in their belly, but they're kids.
That's awesome.
But they sound amazing. And I was like, please put your stuff on Spotify. Yeah. And then my buddy Greg from Wolfface, he had this hardcore band in the early 2000s from Clearwater called Next Season. Mm-hmm. And it was a Star Wars themed hardcore band. And I listened to it and it was all on Bandcamp. And I listened to it. It's like, this is fucking amazing. I love this. And so Michael Sinclair, who produces this show, he got it all on Spotify. And then Elliot Mayo, who sings for Vacancy and Wreath, he had this early band Escapist, and they weren't anywhere. He's like, I don't even think we have, this is where it gets outside. We don't have the MP3s, or we don't have the, whatever the original recording file is that makes it so you can, outside my pay grade. But Mike was able to figure out a way to capture it and put it on Spotify. And so I love it as a vehicle for these local bands because as much as they screw artists out of money and they want to renegotiate for pennies on the dollar, and that sucks for the Foo Fighters or even mid-level or whomever, for Black Clash, they're not going to get paid for that music. No one's buying that album right now, but you can give it to a Tom DeGeorge, or you can give it to whomever and say, listen to these guys. These guys are fucking great. Have them come play. And so that's why I think it's good. So that was part one. And part two was Devin Brady, who I still can't put all the people. I've talked about this with Sean Kyle. I don't know. I'm just entering into this world, so I don't know who knows each other.
I'm doing the same.
Well, yeah. So some people are like, yeah, I grew up with him. And then other people are like, I don't have any fucking clue who that is. But Devin Brady, who's a musician, but he's also a part of this art. I don't even know what you call it. They're called the Crab Devils, but they're this art movement here who are opening this huge thing in Ybor Heights called the Peninsularium, which is this multimedia art installation that's all these semi trucks, and there's music and there's breweries and it's this big fucking thing that they're about to open. But anyway, he's like, I have this idea and you can have it if you want it, but basically it's a local Spotify, and you go around and you sell it to all the restaurants so they don't have to pay this crazy Spotify rate to play.
Oh yeah.
But it's just local bands. So you go into the hub or whatever, and it's just
phenomenal.
It's just playing local bands.
That's phenomenal.
And I think that's a fucking killer idea.
See, I came up with, I can't say I came up with an idea, but I took an idea that another very talented singer and songwriter, Shelby Soul, posted on Facebook. She was like, why don't bands cover each other's music? Why aren't we covering each other's music?
I love covers. It's my favorite.
And I took that and I said, well, hang on. Whoa, that actually could be something really important. So I created this Facebook group called the Tampa Bay Music Scene Cultivators.
Okay.
And the idea behind it is that it's only musicians and songwriters specifically. I shouldn't say that. That's not true. It's only musicians. And I'm hoping that it becomes like essentially like 50-50 between people that play like, cover music and things like that, which is something that I do, and people that write their own music and don't play those cover shows, but need as much publicity as they can get, especially right now.
Right.
And so it occurred to me that like, basically, okay, there are hundreds of guys like me, guys and girls like me, that play in the cover scene. Mm-hmm. And the cover scene is really interesting because some of I know people that maybe not right now, but before COVID, they were playing, 2 gigs a day, 5 days a week for 3 or 4 hour gigs at a time.
Right.
Which is a crazy amount of time to be performing.
Yeah.
And they're all local, and they're all, staying local for the most part. So I thought, wouldn't it be cool if someone created a space where the people that write local music that are incredible, that are really ridiculously talented, went and communicated with the people who are also ridiculously talented people, but they're mostly playing cover music in bars, because the people that are playing that cover music in bars, like I said, they're performing way more frequently than the people that are writing that music. Let's see. So Wolfface, how often would you say they perform?
Before COVID?
Before COVID.
I would say every other month.
Every other month.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then a couple festivals maybe.
Right. So imagine if someone took, a Wolfface song, like me, I've got a gig tonight. Yeah. And so I took a Wolfface song and I covered it, and I say, hey, this is a Wolfface song. Yeah. Go listen to them. Right. A local band.
Right.
And essentially what it would end up being is that the people that do cover music would still be playing covers, but they'd be playing local covers.
Yeah.
Which would, I think, I maybe overly ideal, overly utopian, but I think that people, when they hear new music, they don't seek it out for the most part. There's plenty of people that do.
The accidental find is
like
huge.
You said, low-hanging fruit.
Yeah.
So, and where are people, discovering music? Statistically, well, they're discovering it on the radio. They're discovering it on Spotify playlists, which is another thing my show is going to start doing, by the way. So the radio, Spotify playlists, in the licensed in movies and television, they discover music that way. Commercials, things like that. That's a huge way that people discover music, but also in public spaces where music is playing.
Right.
And especially if a person, I can't tell you how many times as a cover artist, I've had someone come up to me and be like, oh, who's that? Who's that band? Who's that?
Right.
Who's that? Sometimes it's my own stuff.
Yeah.
Luckily, I feel really proud of that fact. But, so if I can turn that into a way that takes the cover artists and makes them champions of the local music scene.
Right.
And they don't even have to play nothing but, local cover music. But
Throw one in, sprinkle it around.
Yeah.
Well, it's like Sean was saying. He said he's been playing these gigs so much lately that he feels like he's at the peak of his powers right now from playing. Like, he's really in the pocket. Yeah, yeah. So there's definitely that. No, I love. I remember when mashups were like a big thing. I used to fucking love those. Like you mix P Diddy with David Bowie. I was like, this is the best thing ever. But you couldn't go anywhere and listen to it because of licensing reasons. And then so covers kind of in that same vein, like I have a playlist on Spotify that it's all covers, and I love it, and I share it and I add to it. And it's kind of a way of being able to do it. But even at that, it's hard to peer covers because if you don't have licensing, a lot of them won't let you play it. So, but I think that would be amazing. If we put, especially if you had disparate acts, like a folky person doing a metal thing or a blah, 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 where you kind of a different take on it. Yeah. That would be huge.
I mean, if a person, I think that perception is so important when it comes to discovering music. So like, so the fact that, if I'm in a bar and I'm playing Tennessee Whiskey, right, and then I finish playing Tennessee Whiskey and I start playing Teenage Fight Song by Sean Kyle, I'm putting those two songs next to each other, literally, so that the one can be associated with the other in terms of elevation.
Well, it's true. You're playing the crowd. You're pulling the strings.
I'm playing the crowd, and as far as they're concerned, all songs are created equal. Right. So if they have that perception of that song the first time they hear it, and then they go look for it, they're going to maintain that perception, and then they're going to love it even more. Right. It's not a famous, enormous, like multimillionaire songwriter. It's a local guy who is still extremely talented, and they can come and see him perform as well for whenever they want to. Essentially. Are
you familiar with the Zoots Christmas show at Crowbar?
Yeah.
So this year they're doing it January 9th. They didn't do it before, so that's coming up. But that's the embodiment of, it's like 30 musicians tagging in, tagging out. Yeah. All covers. And I think they introduced me to Warren Zevon's Lawyers, Guns, and Money, which is now one of my favorite songs. So, it was that kind of thing it leads you to different wells that you wouldn't drink from normally. Sure. Have you been writing at all during COVID? Oh, yeah. So you've been creating your own?
Yeah, a lot of ballads.
Is that gonna
sad music
see the light of day? Any plans as far as that goes?
Yeah, that's definitely. So Sean Kyle, the way I know him is because I recorded a project with him 2 years ago that I crowdfunded. That was really, some people were really nice and helped me get it paid for, and I never released it because basically my life went in a really crazy, difficult direction and it got shelved. Right. And my voice suffered and a number of reasons, but basically, I actually had lunch with Sean the other day and he's like, yeah, we need to go ahead and just finish your project and put it out there.
Not doing anybody good sitting on a show.
It's not doing anybody any good there. And then on top of that, I've been writing a lot more since then. And so I'm actually thinking about releasing 2 different projects and one of them under kind of an alter ego kind of a name.
Very cool.
And, the stuff that I did with Sean is very heavily, country, a little bit of folky Americana, but, very country.
I've been killing Ryan Adams' new album this last week and feeling super guilty about it. Like, I don't know how to feel about
it's got some country influence.
Well, no, the whole who's the Brady Carlisle or who is the girl that accused him of all this stuff? And
I don't know anything.
Oh yeah, he got deep. The album's supposed to come out like a year ago, and this is when it came out that he was like emotionally abusive to his wife, and it used his position to like kind of leverage relationships with female singers, and he got lit on fire. And so it's that Woody Allen thing. It was like, I love your movies, but you're a scumbag. Like, what do I do? Do I put the art over the person or do I just kind of write them off? So, but similarly, he recorded that album like a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. And he finally just like, I'm just going to put it out. And it's a great album, but it's like, kills me. So anyway, well, what's very clear to me is I could probably have you on about 3 more shows and we could,
I'm a talker, man.
Well, we didn't even talk about jujitsu. We didn't even talk about the acts that you had. So do you train still or?
I don't. I did martial arts all my life. But, when I was God, I had to be younger than 10 years old. And I started, learning archery, learning
oh, wow.
sword work.
Holy shit, you're a superhero.
And hardly.
I'll write you a ballad and
Kung Fu.
Yeah.
I learned a mixture of like Kung Fu, Judo, and Marines combat training.
Okay.
Combat training when I was younger. And then probably about 6 years ago, I was training pretty heavily in jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai. And
was this over in St. Pete?
Boxing. No, this was in Tampa.
Okay.
Did you
go to Tampa Muay Thai?
No, I had a good friend who has his own place called Smash.
Okay.
Smash MMA, and it's Smash Brown is his name, basically.
Oh, wow.
Martin.
What else could he have gone into?
Man, yeah, for sure. But he's an incredible fighter, and he was really nice to me because I picked that stuff up pretty quickly. Mm-hmm. In the sense that, like, I think part of the reason I picked up guitar quickly was because I was doing that kind of training at a young age, and it taught me how to, once you get the right motion, how to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it correctly, and knowing that the repetition is going to lead to the ability to do it without thinking about it too much. So I trained for, I think I only trained for maybe about 6 months, maybe something like that. And then I got third-degree burns on my knees.
From that or from something else? From
a stupid mistake with a propane grill.
Okay.
Basically, people asked me to help them light it, and they had a plate of like burgers and onions and stuff, and all I could smell was that. And I couldn't smell the
gas was
that they had been releasing for 15 minutes
just blew
before
up,
I tried to light it, and it created a big fireball.
Oh, geez.
Blew me back, and it was wild. I got really lucky that I didn't, get totally maimed by that experience. But yeah, I got that, and then I hurt my patella on my knee for a couple of months. Fell down some stairs, basically.
Oh, Jesus!
And then a few months after that, right around when that healed, I tore all the ligaments in my left ankle.
Damn!
Playing volleyball, and just like my foot came down on a mound of sand and just rolled.
Yeah, rolled your ankle.
A solid, 90-degree turn, and just pop.
Reminds me of that meme. It's like the only joints I roll anymore is playing basketball with my kid.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, well, so tell me again where people can find the Sunday Sesh.
The best place to find the Sunday Sesh is our website, the Sunday Sesh. It's sundayseshshow.com.
Okay.
We're going to keep that URL even when we change the name and like
redirect it, or
it'll redirect. Yeah. And then to watch right now, the best place to watch the show is there. We have all the episodes on an episode page. I have to go home and update that as soon as I get home, actually. That's on the docket today.
Your music, is it anywhere that people can find online?
Mm-hmm. Ken Apperson is my name, and I am on Spotify right now.
Okay.
It's nothing that I've written in the past 8 years. So when I do finally release some music, so the idea is I'm going to, in January, spend a good chunk of time getting the stuff done that I had done, and demoing the new stuff and releasing the stuff that was done in the first quarter of 2021.
And booking you, people want to have you come play. How do they find you that way?
They can go to my website, kenapperson.com. That's my website. They can find me on social media. I got really lucky with my name. Apparently it's very SEO. So my Instagram is my name. My Twitter is my name.
That's awesome.
Ken Apperson. And find me on there. I want to be friends. If you want to see images of adorable dogs and a little bit of me being a goofball on my show and a little bit of me playing music, follow me on Instagram. I'm most active on there, pretty much.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate you reaching out to me. I'm going to definitely be a big fan of your show, and
thanks, man.
Hopefully we can commiserate behind the scenes on guests and who we should book and that sort of thing.
Yeah, happy to make recommendations. We got really lucky because the majority of the actually, honestly, all of the people we've had on the show have been nothing but like professional, courteous, on time.
I think that's a local music. You kind of got to be.
I think so.
You can't be a fucking circus locally and expect to get anywhere.
Right.
Once you're, top, national, whatever, then you can be an asshole. But, that's another great thing about local music is I've found the artists to be nothing but pleasant, professional, well-spoken, great people. So
Yeah.
Who knew?
We've got on the show, we've got everything but ratings right now.
Well, there you go.
So we're trying to build those numbers as much as we can.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Again, I appreciate it. And hopefully you'll come back sometime.
I will. Absolutely.
All right.
Had a great time.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.